Hi, my name's Benji and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we're teaching you how to play Mage Wars Academy. And we've already done a review for this game and I'll put a link to that in the description below. So we're going to be teaching you in the most concise manner possible without giving you information overload. So in that spirit, the lesson commences in T-5. So the object of the game is to reduce your opponent's mage's hit points to 0, and the hit points can be found on your mage's reference card here. So to set up the game, you'll need access to your mana and damage tracker, and you'll need to populate the spell book depending on what mage you checked, and sadly you're going to have to check the rules reference guide to help you do that for your first game. So each turn is broken down into 3 phases, and both players participate in the turn in a you go I go sort of sense. So the first and second phases are called the reset phase and the upkeep phase. But because you don't do anything in either of those phases really in the first turn, we're going to go straight to the action phase, which is the last phase, and then we'll go through in more detail the first 2 preliminary phases as we've learnt the bulk of the game. But one thing we do need to mention is that your mage is going to be channeling mana, and this is where you need to refer to your mage reference card, because not only will it have a starting mana which you need to start the game with, but it will also have a channeling amount. So you'll combine the two and that'll be the amount of mana, which is what you use to cast spells from your spellbook that you'll have available on that first turn. So to start the action phase, you've got a number of choices, and they all revolve around using your creatures. And I say that because your mage is as well a creature, so anytime you see the rulebook refer to a creature, that includes your mage as well. So you can do one of 3 things as your action before you pass back to your opponent. You can either attack with a creature, you can guard with a creature, which we'll explain in more detail in a moment, and you can cast a spell. And this is where you can peruse your spell book, and as long as you've got the mana to cast the spells from it, you can then resolve those cards. So let's go through each of those now in a little bit more detail. So one action your mage can take is to cast the spell, and obviously only your mage can do that, because whenever you take an action with a creature that includes your mage, you're going to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise to exhaust that card. So to cast a spell you need to exhaust your wizard, and you also need a number of mana equal to the resources found in the top left hand corner of all of these cards in your spellbook. So I've laid out here some of the main categories of cards you can play from your spellbook, and we'll go through those in a bit more detail now. So this first one here is an equipment card. So in the very top left hand corner is its resource cost of 3 mana. Then next to that it denotes whether it's a slow casting spell or a quick casting spell, and as I've already mentioned, we'll go through quick casting a little bit later. Then the numbers next to that are actually irrelevant to Mage Wars Academy. That's how this game integrates with its sister product Mage Wars Arena. And then next to that we have the spell's target. So here it says the mage, and as you'd expect from an equipment, it's going to be targeting your mage and helping your mage out. So you'll then just follow the effects on there. There are a number of keywords on this Whisper Wheel amulet. It's got the dissipate keyword, so you'll just need to refer to the back of the rule book to see what those keywords do. So this second one here is a creature that follows a similar process in the top left hand corner, but next to its mana cost is an egg timer symbol, and that's how you're going to be undertaking regular actions. So quick cast actions, which I keep promising we'll come to, act outside of regular actions. So this creature, like most creatures, you'll need to use your action to cast it. And then its target is the zone, and the zone is effectively the battlefield, if you like. So that's going to stay, as you'd expect from a creature, permanently on the battlefield until a number of damage is dealt to it equal to its hit points that can be found in red on the right hand side of the card here. And then above that hit point figure is its armor value, and armor will help that creature soak up damage, and we'll come to damage and combat again a little bit later. We'll also cover attacks, so we're going to leave the rest of that card and then move on to this enchantment card. So enchantments actually have 2 mana costs in the top left hand corner, and that first number is always 2, because you're going to be paying 2 mana to place that card face down. The idea being you place it face down and your opponent doesn't know what card it is until you spend the amount of mana next to that number, where you're then able to flip that card face up and then place it in its relevant location. So this giant size enchantment is actually going to go on one of your creatures. So now we talk about attacks, and you can attack with creatures, you can attack with spells like this lightning jolt, and even your mage can attack, and always as a basic attack. So instead of actually casting a spell from your spell book, you can actually exhaust your wizard or your mage to use its basic attack. So most will have the same type of iconography denoting the attack. Here we've got a quick cast icon, and that simply means that that can be done or can be used as a counter strike, and we'll get to counter strike more when we talk about the guard action last. And then the next denotes whether it's a melee represented by a sword or a ranged attack represented by a bow. So here in this instance the Satyr Gruff has a melee attack that's then got a number with a red background, and that is going to be the amount of dice you're going to roll that represents the amount of damage you're doing against your proposed target. So once you've selected your target, you'll roll the number of dice denoted by the attack capabilities, and then dependent on the roll is how much damage you'll do to that target. So there are different faces on the dice, and there are 1s and 2s, but also 1s and 2s with either no background to them or to like a bang explosion type background to them. And these ones represent a critical hit. So critical hits are going to negate any army your opponent's creatures might have. So some attacks will have a byproduct effect as well, like this lightning jolt here, that then after the red background number that denotes the number of dice you'll roll, there's also a yellow background number, and that represents this 12-sided die here that will have potentially an after effect on the creature that you're targeting. But it will generally have a target number that you have to roll this dice, and if you get greater to or equal to that number, that counter or that debuff will be applied to the target creature. So the final action you can take is to guard. So remember, anytime our creatures take actions, they need to exhaust or rotate 90 degrees clockwise. But to guard, you're simply going to place one of those counters on the creature that wishes to guard, and what that acts is like a taunt. So anytime your creature wants to make a melee attack, remember the melee attacks are represented by the swords, they have to target that opponent. So ranged attacks can negate that and can simply target anyone they want, including our opponent's mage, but that does act as quite the deterrent against what is the bulk ability on most creatures, that being to do a melee attack. So that's a rather detailed explanation of the 3 creature actions you can take on your turn. And remember, you're going to be taking a full action and then passing to your opponent. It's going to be back and forth until each and every creature is exhausted. So remember, the quick cast actions work outside of that parameter and can only be used once a turn, so long as the spell allows them to do that. So as I mentioned, the reset phase and the upkeep phase are the first 2 phases in the turn order. We'll go through the reset phase now. So remember, this is the very start of the turn. You'll pass the initiative counter, because at the start of the game, one of the players will be denoted as the first player to start proceedings. Once you've done that, you'll reset all of your creatures. Ready them by rotating them back vertically. You'll then flip your markers, and generally that means flipping your quick cast marker, but there may be other counters that you'll need to flip back. And then you'll channel your mana again. Remember, the channeling amount is on your Mage reference guide. So that then completes the reset phase. You then move to the upkeep phase. And this is where cards may refer to the upkeep. So, for example, dissipate counters will be removed once per turn in the upkeep phase. So that's the turn order. Remember, we've done it slightly out of order. It's the reset phase where everything restarts, you channel mana, etc. The upkeep phase, which only certain counters refer to, and then each turn ends, albeit that it's the bulk of the turn, with the action phase, where you go, your opponent goes, you go, your opponent goes, until all creatures have been exhausted. So one last thing to note before you're ready to get to the table: those first 2 turns of a game are always a staging turn, in that you can play creatures but you can't target your opponent with any of those creatures. Similarly, you couldn't target an opponent with an attack spell like this lightning jolt. You can, however, buff your own creatures and enhance them in any way, shape or form. You just simply cannot target your opponent. So the idea being that turns proceed like that from turn 3 onwards until you reduce your opponent's mage's health pool to 0. So that's how this game plays. Now it's up to you, budding Magi's, to get this to the table.